As the Republican National Convention meets this week and they soften their stance on gay marriage and abortion, a Christian must ask himself, should we still get behind the Republican Party, or is there a magical third way? We'll talk about that and more today on Indie Thinker. Welcome to the show. My name is Reed Uberman. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Today's show is sponsored by our friends over at Sailor Ridge. Sailor Ridge is your one-stop shop for all of your family's vacation needs. I'm sure you've seen those really cool-looking tree houses where you can vacation. They've got that and so much more. To see all of the locations and all of the amenities that they have to make your family vacation this summer memorable, you need to go to SailorRidgeTreeSort.com, where you can see all of the offerings they have. And when you do so, let them know that Indie Thinker sent you. Now, the Republican National Convention has been taking place over the last couple of days to much conflicted fanfare. Now, I know that there are a group of conservative Republicans out there that think we should applaud everything that Donald Trump does. Disappointed! I, on the other hand, care about being a little bit more intellectually honest than that. Now, I will also say that I appreciate a lot of what he has done, and I am 100% voting for him in the upcoming election. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't step back and maybe take a look at what it is that truly makes America great and make sure that the Make America Great movement is actually emphasizing those things. So a lot of people had an issue with the fact that Amber Rose got up and spoke at the Republican National Convention. Now, I get the argument, right, that somebody who ultimately doesn't believe in conservative values in almost any area of their life isn't a great spokesperson for the RNC just because she's a social media influencer. But I do have to say that what she spoke on and what she said resonates with some Americans who have been lied to for years. And when they finally look into Donald Trump, it's a different story than what the media has told them. I think that that is a message worth telling over and over and over again. So I had a little bit less of a problem with Amber being there than a lot of conservatives. I actually have a bigger problem with Amber in terms of the fact that she comes from a long line of social media influencers that thinks she has to constantly show her butt to everyone. And I think the bigger problem there is that it is such a degradation of female beauty to believe that your butt is the thing that people want to see, or that that's what makes you beautiful. But that's a podcast for a different day. I actually had a much bigger issue with the fact that Harmeet Dillon got up to give a prayer to the one true God, Wormregrew, or whatever his name is, and you can see that here.
Nanak Das Sada Kurbani. Dear Waheguru, our one true God, we thank you for creating America as a unique haven on this earth where all people are free to worship according to their faith. We seek your blessings and guidance for our beloved country. Please bless our people with wisdom as they vote in the upcoming election, and please bless with humility, honesty, skill, and integrity all those who conduct the election.
Now, I took issue with this prayer online simply because what does Sikhism have to do with making America great? What does it have to do with the conservative platform or even the Republican platform? Nothing at all. And a lot of people took issue with this and they said, well, you don't believe in religious freedom. Religious freedom is the thing that truly makes America great. And I argue with that and I say, no, it isn't. See, people have this conception of freedom. We could do whatever we want in America, and that's what makes us so amazing, is that we can do anything. Well, that actually leads to chaos, and it isn't true. Even in modern day America, you can't go around sacrificing children in the street. You can't even sacrifice animals. So we don't have complete religious freedom. We have religious freedom couched within the principles of Christianity. Let me give you a historical argument. When Europeans came to this country, this land, they found that there were people eating the hearts of virgins and sacrificing children to pagan gods so that they could get some rain to fall on their crops. And what was going on horrified these people. And so they realized that they needed to civilize this land with the civilizing influence of Christianity. Now, we all understand that Christianity was a major influence in this nation and in the West as a whole, such to the point that if you removed Christianity from it, you have no idea what our nation would actually look like. So the argument I make is just simply this, that yes, there is religious freedom in America within the confines of a particular religion. Christianity is what truly made America great. That's why I'm a conservative. And so when we platform Sikhism, I wonder why. Is it just to pander to Harmeet because she's done lots of good things? Well, fantastic. But it doesn't mean that we have to get the thousands of religions up on the platform to pray a prayer to a false god. Ultimately, if we're truly going to make America great, we need to stand up for the principles that made it great. That's why I think Christians only have one choice when it comes to voting in America today. Now, people may disagree with this, but I can 100% tell you at least this, that political agnosticism doesn't really have a place in the Christian worldview, and I'll try to argue that today, because that's kind of what we got in a conversation between Matt Chandler and Lecrae, that the kingdom of God is above all of these political things that are going on here on this earth, and we should be politically agnostic, and one side's not really better than the other. So let's just push that all to the side, and let's try to make a third way. So the question comes, is third wayism even biblical, and is it something that Christians should strive for? I don't think it is. I believe that Matt and Lecrae think that it is. Let's hear what they have to say.
And I don't even know if, there were like a group of y'all were like young rock star preachers, so to speak. It was like just a handful of these communicators. Some of y'all are in cities like Seattle or St. Louis or just random places, but you're in the Bible Belt.
Yeah.
And so you're talking the same talk that someone in New York or Seattle or LA is talking in the Bible Belt. And I felt like it was gaining attention because it was like, whoa, you're shaking stuff up.
Yeah.
But you also weren't following the status quo of like just those kind of, rigid. Was that intentional or was that just your natural?
Well, I think there was a move of God in that day.
Okay.
That was, I think, pretty special.
Yeah.
And the Lord was moving His church, I would argue contextually, for the day that we're in.
Okay.
And I got, by the grace of God, to be one of those pioneers.
Yeah.
What's funny is the conversation I was having with some of those guys back then is some of those guys were in New York, some guys were in Seattle, other guys were like St. Louis. The question was, who has a more difficult job? Them in really secular environments or me in the Bible Belt? And I always argued I had the tougher task.
Really?
Well, I had to help people understand that they're not Christians before they could become Christians.
Talk about that.
Well, these are real stories from the village where I had a guy once that told me, he had come up front, I was praying with him after a service. He was having some pretty significant marital issues. And so I just start asking questions. And in the way he was answering questions, I realized, oh man, I don't think this guy's a Christian. So I just asked him, hey, are you a Christian? And he said, no, absolutely, my whole life. And I was like, well, tell me about it. When did you become a Christian? And his answer was, I grew up in San Antonio.
Man.
Like his answer to,
I'm from Texas.
I'm a Christian, is I'm a conservative.
Yeah.
I was born in San Antonio. My parents went to church.
Yeah.
And so then I'm asking follow-up questions. Did you talk to me about, was there a moment or was it over a period of time? And he's like, no, I was born a Christian. I've always been a Christian. Never, not an hour of my life where I had been a Christian.
I came out the womb loving Jesus.
And then, so I'm like, oh my gosh, this is an issue. And there were all these baptism testimonies of these 20-something young men and women who would get in our waters and they would testify that they grew up in church, that they that they had been baptized when they were young, oftentimes because mom and dad, with a lot of well-meaning desire for their children, would frame it like, do you want to come to heaven with mom and dad, or do you want to go to hell forever? Well, I know a lot of 7-year-olds. I don't know a lot of 7-year-olds who are going to go, give me hell forever.
Right.
And so there wasn't really a personal encounter with the Lord that led to them surrendering as much as they could understand it as a 7 or 8-year-old. I mean, gosh, Lauren got saved, my wife, at 7. And she's just had an ever-increasing growth in her love for Jesus. Even though I'm not trying to make it sound like her life has been all up and to the right. She married me. There's some valleys in there. But they would get in the water and talk about leaving the church, usually because they ran out of gas.
Yeah.
They just ran out of gas on it, man.
Yeah.
They just couldn't be good enough. They kept struggling. And they were in an environment where it wasn't okay to not be okay. And this is that old school fundamentalism, right?
Yeah.
And then they had come to the village. They had heard the grace of God. They had an encounter with Jesus. And now they were saying yes to Jesus, all of life for all of life.
Yeah.
And so I was taking all this stuff in, and I'm like, oh my gosh, everybody thinks they're a Christian here. But that doesn't mean for them they have a personal relationship with Jesus. That doesn't mean for them that they have any intention of submitting to his lordship in their life, in any area of their life. It just means that there's a Bible verse in their bio.
No, I like a lot of what Matt said there, and I genuinely like Matt, but I think there's a little bit of wrong-headedness in what he just said. Because if you think that you need to do some untangling with the conservative who thinks that he's a Christian because he has a scripture verse in his bio, just wait till you meet the person who thinks they're a Christian when they have a pride flag in their bio. See, there's an assumption underlying what Matt Chandler just said, that Christian conservatives think they're Christians very often, and very often aren't. Or at least you need to untangle the scripture from the conservative movement. And I would agree with that there is a difference between the two. And as much as we can make the conservative movement Christian, the better our country will be, is what I would argue. But that presupposition that it's only conservatives who are fooled into thinking they're Christians is deeply flawed, because right now, especially, we see a group of Christians who are deeply progressive and deceived into thinking they're Christians. And they're creating a world in which it's okay to murder babies, it's okay to mutilate your bodies because of a feeling, it's okay to have crippling anxiety and even suicidal tendencies because you've been told over and over and over again that the climate is going to heat up to the point where you're just going to be snuffed out in about 2 days or so.
How about no, Scott?
So all of that worldview in the progressive movement attached to Christianity is way more problematic than the conservative who thinks he's a Christian. Now, I'll argue that both are a problem, and genuine salvation still matters. Yes, just because you're a Republican, you're not a Christian, and just because you're a Democrat, you're not a Christian. But one is way more troubling than the other. And that's where Matt Chandler is only half right. He says conservatives being deceived into thinking they're a Christian isn't quite where we are right now. I totally agree with that. But I also think that's not where we were when Matt Chandler was in his heyday in the 2010s and beyond. He didn't have the capacity to actually see that the real creeping issue, the real problematic things outside of the context of his immediate church in Dallas, the real issue was a progressive movement that was very damaging to people who needed to hear the gospel and was counterproductive to the proclamation of the gospel. See, this is something that Gresham Machen argued long ago in the 1930s. He was saying this, that liberal Christianity is at every point in opposition to Christianity. In fact, it is a different religion. So this is all the way back in the 1930s. And now Christian liberalism has evolved into Christian progressivism and now takes on the shape of people who have whole churches that have drag queen story hour and celebrate the God who was the first they, them. Matt didn't see that back then, and it was a creeping problem then, and it has exploded in the present. So I can't help but wonder if that's why Matt hasn't really been seeing issues clearly lately. I mean, I don't want to necessarily bring up the past, but Matt has had issues with DEI hiring in the past and advocating for the fact that he would hire somebody simply because of diversity. And at the MLK 50 event, Matt Chandler basically trashed white evangelicals as being part of the problem and being so dumb that they would hate Martin Luther King Jr. if he was here today. That's just how racist these white evangelicals are. That they would hate Martin Luther King Jr. today because he would probably be a socialist. Not being able to separate the fact that the civil rights issue of Martin Luther King Jr., the way was paved for that by white Protestants in the past, push that to the side. But the fact that the civil rights of Martin Luther King Jr. is vastly different than his clear socialist ties, which were problematic then and are problematic today. And of course, we have to mention the fact that Matt had to step away from his pulpit because of inappropriate text with another woman. Now, I think some of that was blown out of proportion, but needless to say, what we continually see is a pattern of Matt not clearly seeing what time it is and not clearly being able to acknowledge certain basic facts. That the conservative movement in America is actually a good thing for the proclamation of the gospel. I'll try to argue that as we continue the conversation, but let's see if Matt can get us a little bit closer to actually acknowledging the fact that there are preferable worldviews and politics actually plays a role in the Christian worldview. What might that be? Let's see if we can get to it.
The book, The Overcomers.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you've written a couple books already. Why are you writing this book? Why another book? Why this one?
Yeah, I just think I'm trying to speak into this moment we find ourselves in that's filled with anxiety or outrage.
Yeah.
Sometimes a mingling of both. Somebody needs to think of a new emotion, which is anxious rage, maybe. Maybe that'll be my next book. But I was seeing, especially after all the turmoil of 2021, even in the church I pastor, I was seeing a pulling back from the mission of God as it lays in front of us. And this was playing itself out across evangelicalism in either acquiescence to the culture or silence. And I wanted to call people into the victory of King Jesus.
Yeah.
Like it is my adamant belief that this is our moment in history.
Yeah.
Like we're God's big plan for this moment. Like nobody's coming to bail us out of this thing.
And what's happened in this moment? You're talking about post-COVID,
All of it.
Like,
I'm
okay.
saying the train wreck that we find ourselves in culturally.
Right.
Politically,
Yeah.
economically,
Yep.
religiously. I mean,
Yeah.
name a domain.
Okay.
Train wreck.
Okay.
So what this does, if you're not careful and you're a Christian, is it will create anxiety. I don't want to be labeled as a bigot. I don't want to be, I don't want to be misunderstood. I don't want my faith to be misunderstood. So let me acquiesce, give in, become more progressive, if you will. Or let me just watch these 8 seasons of Suits on Netflix.
Sheesh.
Let me just doom scroll and let me go to church and keep reading my Bible, but sit this one out and let's leave this fight to the Lecraes and Matt Chandlers of the world. And we'll just, but that's not how the kingdom of God spread across the world. It hadn't spread through blue check celebrity Christians, although God's used those.
Yeah.
The gospel has grown to 2.38 billion Christians worldwide through the everyday faithfulness of ordinary Christians working in a domain of society, living in a neighborhood of a town or city, and doing so faithfully, being gospel heralds and gospel inviters.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just say, hey guys, this is our moment. Like C.S. Lewis isn't about to come bail us out with some clever narratives. G.K. Chesterton isn't going to show up and critique the current political climate.
Wow.
It's our moment, and don't sleep on it.
Wow.
And so I got the phrase "the overcomers" from the book of Revelation. So when Jesus is writing to John writing Jesus's words to the 7 churches of Asia Minor.
Yeah.
At the end of each letter, he says, "And to he who overcomes, I will give. To he who overcomes, I will give. To he who overcomes, I will give." And so the overcomers is that framework. You've been uniquely wired, uniquely gifted, and uniquely placed by God in this moment of history to push back darkness, establish light. That's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
No matter what domain you're a housewife, this is what uniquely wired, uniquely placed, uniquely gifted as a housewife or a businesswoman or a politician or a firefighter or a welder or a C-suite executive.
Yeah.
Uniquely wired, uniquely placed, uniquely gifted. And then what I did is got into the book of Revelation and just walked us through Revelation as a template of the victory of King Jesus over every principality, power, and dark moment to infuse the Christian with courage.
Yeah.
So the book of Revelation's been given to the people of God for 2,000 years to put steel in their spine and to help them live courageously despite what they might be seeing.
Yeah.
Now, this is the best part of the whole conversation between Matt and Lecrae, in my opinion. He is right. We are God's big plan. And there are a group of people out there who are going to either sit on the sidelines because they're so deeply afraid of being misunderstood, or there are people who are going to pick up the principles that matter most and actually share those and make a difference in the world. I think Matt is 100% correct about that. And that's why we need to follow that line of thinking to its logical conclusion in terms of where we align politically as Christians. So let me give you a historical argument as far as this is concerned. If we're going to make the argument, right, that there is no right, there is no left, there's just simply a third way that God is calling all of us to, which kind of leans into the kind of separation of church and state argument, which is the most misunderstood concept in all of American history, perhaps. Let me give you a historical argument, because apparently our founding fathers didn't get the memo about separation of church and state as much as some people would like them to. Our founding fathers said things like this. Now, this is from George Washington. It is impossible to rightly govern a nation without God in the Bible. Now, that's pretty stark, right? That's staggering to hear our first president tell us that the implications of our nation were that we were going to govern a nation according to God and the Bible for once and for all. See, they weren't just fleeing Christianity when they fled England, when they fled Great Britain. They were trying to flee religious persecution to actually create a more stable and more beautiful nation, which would allow them the freedom to worship the God of the Bible, not the freedom to do whatever they want to or to worship whatever they want to or to do whoever they want to. Our founding fathers actually weren't after that. They were after a nation that would be governed according to God and His holy word. This is what John Adams said. He said that our Constitution is made for a moral and religious people, and it is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. I say all that to say this, that the reason America is great is because it believed in something great. Its values and its principles were great from its inception, and those were deeply embedded in Christian truth. After all, the Bible is the most quoted book in all of our founding documents. So why is America great historically and in the present if we can find a movement that will hang on to these truths? Well, of course, it's Christianity. So should we desire to promote that and use the tools that are at our disposal as Christians to secure a more perfect union made in the likeness and in the image of what the scripture actually tells us will make a more beneficial nation to all people, a freer nation, and a nation rid of some of the despotism and totalitarianism that has happened throughout the ages? Should we take a cue from the Old Testament and from the New Testament so that we can create a more perfect union? I think the answer is obviously yes. So that makes it unconscionable to be politically agnostic and not to pay attention to the facts on the ground in terms of where we are politically now. So let's hear one final clip on where Lecrae and Matt land on this.
Regardless of whatever political party, let's say it's Republican, let's say it's Democrat, if you have a senator from either party in your congregation and they're like, hey, will you come be a part of said thing? How do you
Never.
Okay.
And we even had, and I'm glad there's someone in the room that knows my world, not you, but my assistant over here. But we literally had the governor of the state of Texas show up and then call us and be like, hey, we'd love to say a prayer or something. I was like, yeah, no.
Okay.
I'll pray for you.
Yeah.
But no, we don't do that. Now, I will say that might change for me on local issues, like school board issues, things like that. I might be a little bit more vocal about. But no, sir, you don't get to use my pulpit for that. Here's the best thing I've heard, and I'll certainly say this fall. One, neither side is for us.
That's good.
Neither side is for us.
That's good.
And this is N.T. Wright. So I'm stealing from N.T. Wright, Michael Bird, Jesus and the Powers.
You gave him credit.
Is
now
the
yours.
book.
You say it.
No, this is the second time I've said it. So it's the third time where I'm going to say a friend of mine says.
Is it in the Overcomers book?
No, it's not. I should have. This book came out after mine.
Right.
But he said, I just thought this was brilliant, that the left wants the kingdom but does not want the king. And the right wants the king, but does not want the kingdom. Goodness sakes, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it, Cray, and then...
Yeah. So there's Lecrae in the background shouting, no nuance to what Matt just said, and we'll get into the substance of their conversation in just a moment, but let me just say that the word nuance is becoming more and more a nonsense term. It's essentially today, it means anybody who doesn't agree with me just could not be thinking clearly whatsoever. And I gotta be honest, I'm a little bit tired of this kind of emotional knee-jerk reactionary nonsense where somebody has a point of view to make and then the person doesn't even respond to the substance of the argument. They just say, no nuance. You're disagreeing with me, so you couldn't possibly be nuanced. So it's becoming a nonsense term, suffice to say. But let's jump in to the nuance of some of what was just said so that we don't make the same mistake. So the NT Wright quote, I think, is a perfect example of what I find a little bit objectionable to the conversation Lecrae and Matt are having. And N2 Wright essentially says that there's a group of people that are for the king but not for the kingdom, and a group of people who are for the kingdom and not for the king. Now, of course, we can easily try to box in our political parties that we have today into that and just assume that the talking points of the left are totally true, that Republicans and conservatives, they don't care about the poor, they don't care about those who are trying to seek asylum, they don't actually love people because love is love at the end of the day. And conservatives don't understand that. They don't have enough tolerance, and they don't have enough acceptance and inclusivity, as though tolerance and inclusivity were actually any kind of virtue to shoot for from a Christian perspective, which they're not. The reason Jesus didn't talk about inclusivity and tolerance is because Jesus wasn't about inclusivity, he was actually about exclusivity, and he wasn't about tolerance because there are things that you should never tolerate as a thinking human being, and Jesus certainly didn't tolerate everything, turning over the tables and all of that. So needless to say, the talking point that it is the Republicans or the right today who they love Jesus, but they just don't love people. They don't want the kingdom here on this earth. I think is a false talking point, but that's essentially what N.T. Wright is saying. So it's the Republicans who love the king and they hate the kingdom, and it's the Democrats who love the kingdom, but they don't want to talk about and emphasize Jesus. Now there's a small sliver of truth to that, but ultimately, that's a binary that just isn't simply true. It is predicated upon the propaganda that we've been fed for the longest time about both the right and the left. And the truth is this. We're going to have to be honest about what kind of mission field we want. Let's just step back for a moment and, as a Christian, say this, that the right and the left in America are both mission fields. Both of them need Jesus, right? Equally so. I don't think that's true. But let's just assume for a moment that the right and the left equally need Jesus. The question that I have for you is just simply this. What mission field would you rather have? One that is steeped in conservative values or progressive values? Which would be a better staging ground for missionary work? Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, the people who know they're lost and need Jesus, those are the ones who are going to receive the gospel the most. And there may be some truth to that, but ultimately, I think that idea is mostly overplayed because we have the argument that we need right in front of us if we look at history. See, America was founded upon Christian values and Christian principles, and I believe that we should use whatever tools are within our disposal to try to emphasize that and try to create that. And because America was founded on those principles, America has become the greatest missionary headquarters in the history of the world. We have sent more missionaries out and sent more missionary dollars out to other places around the world in America than any other place in the world. Why? Because there is a rich, fertile foundation of Christian values and ethics in America, as opposed to other parts of the world. And it has created a great, exceptional nation as a result of that. So we have to choose which mission field we want. Both are mission fields, but what is the best staging ground for the proclamation of the gospel and the furtherance of talking about Jesus to as many people as possible? I think the answer is clear. And Abraham Kuyper said this. It's also known as Kuyperianism, that there is no square inch, no speck of dust under heaven that doesn't belong to God. That's why I think we as Christians are going to have to be honest about the political tools that are within our disposal and how we use them effectively to create a more perfect union and to make a great America. So the people who are espousing a third way that say, oh, political parties are stupid and I believe in the Bible, I don't believe in politics, are ultimately saying, well, then Jesus doesn't have any authority in the realm of the political, but of course he does. Third wayism to me seems nothing more than escapism. Of course, I believe that the Bible has a higher authority than conservatism, and certainly a higher authority than progressivism. But it doesn't mean that we don't have a role in the political. So we use this word a lot, political. I don't want to be political, but we don't actually ever define what that means. And political, in my mind, essentially at its finest, just simply means this, not even right or left, but it means this, a philosophy for life, a way to create ideas into policy and then to live them out in the world. When you put it that way, Christians obviously have an obligation to ensure that the political world is confined and instructed by the values and the principles that we see in the Bible. So if you don't believe in chopping off the body parts of kids, or mutilating babies in the womb, or creating a world in which drag queen story hour becomes an issue of, quote, freedom, of course, while these same communities are perfectly happy to persecute a baker in Colorado. If you don't think that's the world you would like to live in, then the answer is clear. There is one choice. It doesn't mean that you sell out your virtues and your values to one political party or even to one political candidate. I myself am deeply disappointed in some of the things that is going on at the RNC and the RNC platform on marriage and abortion. But it doesn't mean that I'm willing to totally ignore the fact that there is just one simple, clear choice if you're going to be a consistent biblical Christian in America. And if you don't make that choice, I can't help but wonder if you're trying to curry favor, to win some brownie points with a group of people who will only applaud you if you water down the gospel to such a degree that it's no longer the gospel. I'm not willing to do that, and so for me, the choice is clear. I'd love to hear what you think about it down in the comments section below. If you like this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and check out our sponsors for today, and throw a little love their way. But most importantly, go with God.